Coming up in this week's Torah portion.
Has the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission reviewed the hiring practices of the priesthood?
The blasphemer in our Torah portion is the son of an Israelite woman and the son of an Egyptian father. What is he?
Where do we see Yom Teruah or Yom Kippur observed in the biblical text?
What does Nehemiah chapter 8 reveal about the sacred calendar?
Did I find an example of honor killing in the priestly literature?
Do we do these shows for money?
Jono, let's dig into this one.
Let's do it. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org. That's truth number 2, letter U.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me from the Holier Institute in Louisiana is the author of the Moses Scroll, Ross Nichols. G'day, mate.
Hey, Jono, how are you, my friend?
Doing very well. Thank you, my friend. We are in Emor. We're doing season 3 of Torah Pearls as we continue through, Ross, the weekly Torah portions through the lens, or from the perspective of the Moses Scroll and the documentary Hypothesis, brought to you by Tanakh Tours. That's TANAKH, TanakhTours.com. If you would like to join Ross and myself on an adventure through Egypt and Jordan and Israel, there is still time to do that. We're going to be doing that in November, and you can secure your seat on the bus by going to TanakhTours.com, TANAKH, TanakhTours.com. Now, before we begin, Ross, have you published the Torah tablet for numbers? Can people get that?
Oh, yeah. That's right. The link is in the description, Jono, and we've got, it's the last week of this month that we're currently in, that we're going to be beginning. The last weekend is when we begin the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. So if they want to get the Torah tablet, they can go ahead and get it now, and we've made some improvements on the ordering for overseas orders. Australia and in Europe, you can get it. So anyway,
all right, link in the description.
Get that.
Get that, because that's going to help you as we go through it. We are almost finished Leviticus. There is time to get your numbers Torah tablet. A couple of weeks we will be there. By the way, speaking of books, Ross, can we just quickly mention these are the words you've republished? This one. Tell me about this. What's going on?
All right. So here's the quick bit on that. We had several people who reached out to me and said, I'm learning Hebrew, but I'm not so good with the Hebrew script yet. Why don't you have the transliteration of the words so that, while I'm learning, I can use the transliteration? And so that's what we did. We went in, Jono. We went through every one of those words, more than 1,000 of the most frequently used words in the Hebrew Bible, added every single word now has according to the SBL, Society of Biblical Literature, style. And I was so happy with it when it was done. So Seth created the cover for it, and we uploaded it, and it went straight to number one in
number one.
So it is number one in vocabulary books.
But the difference is primarily that every single word has a transliteration. So if you're not exactly sure how to pronounce it, that's going to help you do that. And well, that's excellent. I can see the value in that. And it's a little bit bigger.
It's a little bit wider. So it's instead of 5.75 inches, it's actually instead of the 4 inches, it's 5.75. So it's the same size as the Torah tablets.
There you go.
But it's nice.
Look nice on the bookshelf. Get one of those while you're there. Link in the description. So listen, we do have some questions and comments, Ross, and there's one comment in particular that I'd like to address from a disgruntled viewer, unhappy customer, Ross, and I think maybe we'll save that until the end.
Let's do it. Let's save it till the end. But let me just say this: you said, and you say this every week, that one of the things that we really focus on this season of Torah Pearls, unlike the other ones, is that we're focusing on the Pentateuch through the lens of the documentary hypothesis and the Moses Scroll. Well, it seems that our person here, our disgruntled viewer, has a problem with both of those. But we'll read it. We'll read it out loud at the end. Let's save it.
Not everyone is pleased with this perspective, but you know what? We'll talk about this at the end. But as I've often mentioned, the first season of Torah Pearls was through the lens, if you like, of it was a Karaite / Christian friendlier approach. Second season was more of a counter-missionary / rabbinic, bit more of a lens from that perspective. And that's it. Whatever lens you apply and whatever lens you consistently approach the text through, it's going to upset somebody. Anyway, this individual is upset from the perspective that we're taking. Yeah, very. Unpack it. I really quite enjoyed it. Anyway, we're going to get to it.
All right.
Now, listen, we are in Emor. We're powering through Leviticus, and that finds us in chapter 21 through to the end of, I think, chapter 24.
24. Yeah.
There are some fireworks in this one, but it begins. Now, before we even begin, actually, I'll tell you what, I'm laughing, and people will understand why when we get to the end we talk about this comment. Ezra, our AI critical scholar, can you give us a critical summary of Torah portion Emor?
Oh, I'm sure he can.
Sure he can.
All right, friends, buckle in. Parashat Emor. Leviticus 21:24 gives us a dense but fascinating snapshot of priestly concerns, and from a text-critical lens, it's a goldmine. First off, Emor opens with regulations about priestly purity. Who can approach the sanctuary? Who can handle sacrifices? And under what conditions? This whole section reflects a or priestly source agenda, heavily focused on maintaining ritual boundaries and hierarchical distinctions. You'll notice the priests are set apart not just in role, but in body, lineage, and mourning practices. There's an obsession here with perfection, both physical and moral, which tells us we're dealing with a post-exilic concern for restoring the cultic order. Then we shift into the sacred calendar. Here's where it gets especially layered. The festival list in Leviticus 23 is structured and formal, clearly priestly. But if you compare it with Deuteronomy's version, you'll catch the evolution. In Deuteronomy, the festivals are more communal and agriculturally grounded. Here, they're temple-centric and ritual-heavy. This suggests different settings. Leviticus is post-exilic, temple-focused, maybe from a time when the cult was being centralized again. Deuteronomy's list likely predates this, coming from a more populist, pre-exilic reform movement. Then we get a kind of miscellaneous laws section, lampstands, showbread, and the curious case of the blasphemer. This last story, about the man with an Egyptian father, is a narrative interruption in an otherwise law-heavy portion. Many scholars think it's a late insertion, maybe a didactic parable to reinforce the seriousness of holiness, especially speech. So Emor, in a nutshell, is a priestly playbook, obsessed with order, drawing hard lines between sacred and profane, and building a liturgical year that reinforces temple centrality. It's written from a context where maintaining ritual identity was survival, likely during or after the exile, when reasserting what it meant to be holy was the main concern.
A priestly playbook, Jono. I like that.
Likely during or after the exile. It is fascinating. We will be talking about, of course, Leviticus 23, over which wars have been fought, Ross. No doubt. Even today.
And still are being, yes.
And still are, that's right. And as soon as you start talking about the feast days, particularly if you're going to be talking about them as a post-exilic invention or elaboration, the way that they are formed, no doubt we're going to be winning friends and influencing people, Ross, in this
no doubt
episode of Torah Pills.
And look, Ezra, by the way, Ezra's got his own little fan club. Ezra doesn't hold back. He's saying these things, and people are really getting upset. But go ahead, Jono. I'm ready, man. I'm ready to dive in.
What we're going to be doing, though, Ross, is we're going to be offering pretty, I think, convincing evidences of the evolution of the feast days as we go through Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Nehemiah. Ezra didn't mention Nehemiah, but Nehemiah offers a lot of clarity there. So we're going to be doing that.
A lot in this show, Jono. This is a packed episode. We got to get into this thing, man.
That's Leviticus 23, and it begins with 21. So we've got to rip through a couple of chapters just so that we can get there, Ross. And it begins like this. It says, "The Lord said to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, none shall defile himself for any person," or in brackets I have any dead person, among his kin, except for the relatives that are closest to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, and his brother. Also, Ross, for a virgin sister close to him, because she has not married. So in other words, she has not left her father's household to become part of another man's household.
Right.
She's still within. And so,
still at home.
She's still at home. But he shall not defile himself as a kinsman by marriage, so profane himself. So in other words, his mate Jimmy dies. Tough luck, can't go to the funeral.
Yeah.
Unless he's a close relative. Then we get into, so verse 5, talking about, so this is Moses telling the sons of Aaron, they shall not, God saying to tell him this, they shall not shave smooth parts of their heads or cut the side growths of their beards or make gashes in their flesh. This is an interesting thing because in chapter 19, verse 27-28, it says this for all Israelites.
I had that in my notes too. It's a great
What do you
minds
make of
think
that?
alike. Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know, but it is slightly different though, right?
A little bit.
I know that one here, it has that you're not supposed to make gashes, I think is the way this translation puts it. Don't make any cuttings in the flesh. But in 1928, isn't that where we get the idea that you're not supposed to have a tattoo?
Yeah, well,
not so much here, but in 19. Is that right, or am I missing
in 19?
That?
Well, 19. It's sort of from 26. It says, "You shall not anything with the blood. You shall not practice divination or soothsaying. You shall not round off the side growth of your head." Right, got to have the big long payot. The longer, the holier, and or destroy the side
remember?
growth of your beard.
Wait. Remember our friend. We can't name names, but we used to talk about the payot prince.
The payot prince.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Prince. No, there was a character that we would joke around and refer to as the payout prince because he won the competition. If there was payout competition, and I don't know if there is payout competition,
there should be. Yeah, there should be
because some people go to great lengths, literally great lengths, to win that competition, Ross. And it just so happened that the payout prince would absolutely win, hands down. No competition. He left everyone dead when it came to. He had spectacular payout. I don't know that it would serve well if you had to go to war. I'm pretty sure you'd have to tie that up in a bundle behind you. Yeah. You're going to have a
some kind of man bun.
Bun. It's going to end up a man bun if you're going to fight in war. You can't have robes dangling from the side of your head.
No,
it doesn't. It wouldn't work. But when you let them down, the payout prince, love that guy. Whatever. We'll have to catch up about.
I don't
him
know.
Later
We're going
on.
to have to look.
All right. Anyway, so where was I? All right. Okay. So, or destroy the side growth of your beard. You shall not make gashes in your flesh for the dead, or incise any marks on yourself. I am the Lord. And so some say, well, I guess all of these practices are things that you shall not do for the dead. So therefore, if you do it not for the dead, can we have tattoos or gashes or marks?
Can we talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah.
Let me tell you what I want to do, Jono, and let's see if I can get people kind of excited about this.
All right.
I have a tattoo. From when I was in the Army, in the U.S. Army, when I was a young man, 18, I got a boy. I was a boy. But I got a tattoo of an eagle, eagle's face on an American flag, which is tattered. Yeah, and it's kind of a tough go awesome. USA kind of thing.
Yeah,
and so then, years later, as I become more and more religious and I decide that I should be following all of these rules and regulations, I often thought, I wish I would have known not to get a tattoo. And my family, no one in my family, my wife, my kids, none of them have tattoos that I know of. Anyway, but I'm thinking now. Let me tell you what I'm thinking I want to do. When we go back to Israel, there is a tattoo parlor in the old city, Razzouk, Razzouk tattoo. And supposedly this family has been doing tattoos in the Holy Land since the 1300s. And I'm considering getting a tattoo at Razzouk Tattoo. I don't know what yet, but I've got a couple of ideas. But maybe people can leave in the comments if I should get a tattoo, if I'm going to go to hell if I get another tattoo. Or if I do get a tattoo, what should I get a tattoo? Well,
going through the Torah portion from this perspective, we know that the priestly material with which we're still dealing. Oh, well, I guess we're in. Are we still in H, Ross?
Yeah, we're still in H. Yeah,
and this is very late. Therefore, the question becomes, well, is it then actually divinely imparted? And the answer to that would be, well, no.
Well,
So,
or even if it is, if somebody says, "Well, Jono, I hate it when you say that," I believe that it is, but is it for me, or is it more of a priestly a rule? See, so
yeah.
there you go. All
So
right.
there it is. And and if it's not for remembrance of the dead, Ross,
Yeah, no,
is it
I'm not
okay?
going to
And
do
so
that.
these are questions. Now, I don't have any tattoos. I'm not a fan. I do like your tattoo. It's cool. It's fine. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, I'm not a fan. I know everyone today wants to cover themselves in tattoos. I think it's absolutely degrading of the
Well,
human body. I
but
think it makes people-
would you maybe you could go with me and we could get matching tattoos. You know, like you didn't want to go through the tunnel in Siloam and you did with me. Maybe this would be the next adventure.
No, I can absolutely guarantee I'm not going to do that. But
you could film it.
I'll cheer you on and film you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If you want to get a tattoo. And now that reminds me of another character in our lives that we used to refer to as Tramp Stamp. That's whatever happened to him?
Oh,
Now, that's a great example as well. Can we talk about him for a second? That was
do we talk? Don't know names, but what was the guy's tattoo?
No, I think it was a
tramp
Jesus
stamp
tattoo.
is.
Tramp stamp. You have to explain to everyone what a tramp stamp is, because you had to explain it to me.
It's just it's not necessarily appropriate. So if any of our viewers have one of these, please understand that it's just the name that somebody else gave it. But it's this a guy too. It's a man who had a tattoo on the small of his back. What did it say, Jono? It was something about Jesus.
It was a Jesus tattoo. I love Jesus or whatever. I don't know. But this individual became
extremely religious.
He converted to Orthodox Judaism, and he really wanted to be super, super Orthodox, and that would have been awkward for him. And I think maybe, I don't know if he went and had the tattoo removal. That's no fun. Now, by the way, people, talking about that, that's not good for you. If you've got a tattoo and you don't like it anymore, just leave it where it is, because basically what they do...
Pull your underwear. Just wear your underwear really high if you have... yeah. Okay, so anyway...
I got to tell you what happens. It's going to cook your skin. They basically cook. The red blood cells come and take the ink, a lot of which has a lot of heavy metals and whatever. And it's going to take that and store it in your kidneys and your liver and whatever. And it's not good. Leave it where it is. Tough luck. But this is the thing about tattoos, Ross, is that in the same way that fashions change, you don't wear... I mean, you still wear your paisley shirts, but
yeah. But
generally
I'm trying to bring it back. Yeah.
You're trying to bring it back. That's right. And to be honest, I think paisley shirts should be brought back. I'm with you there. But in the same way that we update our cars or whatever it might be, you're going to get sick of that tattoo. Eventually, not everyone, not all of them, but eventually. All right.
You almost talked me out of it. But if I do ever get another tattoo, it's going to be from Razuk Tattoo in the old city, because it goes back to the 1300s.
We've talked about it. But here it is. So these things, it's off the table for Jimmy Israelite, but it's doubly off the table for the priest, as it says in verse 5. Verse 6, they shall be holy to the God. They shall not profane the name of their God. They shall offer the Lord's offering by fire, the food of their God. Must be holy. Now, Ross. Now, I think we talked about this in the last Torah portion, or the Torah portion before, because in Leviticus chapter 3, it talks about, the food of God. In Leviticus chapter 10, I think it is, it talks about how God consumed the fat with the magical fire that we assume came from the ark out of the Holy of Holies, and then how he proceeded to, directly after that, through the same means, consume Nadab and Abihu. He ate them.
Yeah.
And then it refers to here the food. So does the priestly writer believe that God actually eats the food? What's going on?
Yeah, I really think that he does, but there are two different pictures, and I know we have touched on this in the past, but you brought up, maybe we don't need to bring Ezra in on this question, but I did think about, when I walked through this Torah portion and I read, particularly in 21, as you pointed out, verse 6, verse 8, verse 17, verse 21, verse 22, all talk about the bread of God, the food of God.
Lechem.
And yet, So, yes, the priestly writer wants us to believe that God, these sacrifices are food for God. What is that? Is the word ambrosia? Doesn't that mean the food of the gods? Anyway, so the idea is that this is God's food. But then we have other texts which are contrary to the priestly writer's view, like Psalm 50, where God is presented as saying, do I eat? If I was hungry, would I contact you and have you kill me a goat? Do I drink the blood of bulls and goats? So the counter to it is a more sensible anti-cult position. In this case, I think it's very clear. But we have a tension. We have a tension in the text. Some of the writers believe that God is waiting to be fed, like many ancient gods in many ancient temples.
That's exactly right. Verse 7, Ross, they shall not marry a woman defiled by harlotry, nor shall they marry one divorced from her husband, for they are holy to their God, and they must treat them as holy since they offer the food of the God. Okay, so there it is. They are holier than thou. And we find out just a little bit later on that the high priest, of course, is even holier than the regular priests.
The holiest.
They're the holiest of thou, right? But this is hard work. I know Levites or Kohanim today that just find it impossible. And of course, today, I mean, my goodness, we live in a very different culture. And they just cannot find themselves, because of this rule, a partner.
Yeah.
They can't.
Yeah. It's very strict. And, it's almost like it's the requirements for a woman, for these priests, is so tight. The window is very narrow, and it seems sort of condescending on women who've been divorced. And the priest, if a priest writes this, he says, "Well, let me tell you, I can only have a virgin. I can't have anybody." It's really strange, but they've sort of boxed themselves in, is what you're saying.
Well, certainly today they have, because the culture of today is not. It doesn't help. Let's just say that. But what it is emphasizing is that there is an ideal. Obviously, there's an ideal. The ideal is to marry a virgin, but absolutely must be for the priest, is what it's saying here.
And we should say that should go both ways. We should say that men should be virgins when they marry as well. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. All for that.
Hey, let me throw something at you though, Jono. This troubled me when I read it. Have you ever seen, like on a news report or something, maybe a video, some of these short videos that go around and they go viral about in certain cultures in the Middle East where someone, it's called an honor killing, where a young girl does something, plays the harlot, or is accused of it, whether she does or not.
The name of the family.
Brings shame to the name of the family. And they beat her with sticks, and those things are just horrid to watch.
Or they actually killed her. They
actually killed her. But one thing I haven't seen.
What's that?
No, I mean I haven't seen where they light them on fire. I mean, that would be the worst of the worst, wouldn't it?
That is ISIS material, and it wouldn't surprise me if something like that has happened under ISIS type behavior. The real extremists.
Well, the priestly writer says that's what you ought to do. Look at verse 9.
Verse 9 says, when the daughter of a priest defiles herself through harlotry, it is her father whom she defiles, right? She brings shame to her father's house, right? She shall be put to the fire. And maybe this is the verse. Maybe this is the verse that sparks that sort of observation in the Islamic world. It's interesting, isn't it, Ross? Because obviously the 10 words in the Moses Scroll, let's use the Moses Scroll, speaks against adultery. Not harlotry in general, but it says, cursed is the man who engages in adultery. And it defines that within, or blessed is the man who does not come near. In fact, well, let me quote it specifically, because I don't want to get this wrong.
And while you're doing that, I'm just making a couple of quick notes about some of my favorite harlots.
What?
Yeah.
You're doing what now?
Yeah, you keep looking for what you're looking for, and I'm just making a quick note of some of my favorite harlots, I said.
That's what I thought you said.
Yeah, that's what I
All right.
said.
All right. Blessed is the man who does not defile his neighbor's woman, and everyone says amen, but in the curses it says, cursed is the one who draws near to any close relative, or who commits adultery with his neighbor's woman, or who lies with any animal. And that is more akin to, I mean, I remember you doing a Shabbat study on this, and the way that you defined adultery is not simply just to sleep with another man's wife, but to sleep with someone alternative to your wife. An alternative. Do I remember that correctly?
I'm trying to remember exactly where I would get that, but it is certainly, it's almost like the command, though, as you read it, isn't it? It really seems to be like, don't take the woman of another man. I think that's the way I would read it more clearly.
And not just that, but within the context of coveting and the latter commandments too, cursed is the man who lifts his eyes towards his neighbor's woman, or towards his maidservant, and so on and so forth. And and
it's sort of restrictive, and it should be. I mean, it's something that is relationships are to be much more narrow than most people in today's culture might say.
And it is upon the man. It's upon the man, as it says here, to exercise restraint and to be responsible. It's his duty. What it doesn't say is that it says, "Cursed is man," and then there are the consequences of the curses. You can read that, and what is not listed there is that you are burnt to death, or that she is burnt to death. It's contrary to the Moses scroll. But you're right, honor killing in verse 9 right here. Mm-hmm.
Now, my favorite harlots, just because the thing about harlots shows up in this quite a bit, and people are very judgmental, and I'm not encouraging harlotry. I think the Bible's very clear on this in many, many places, and it's not a good idea. But here's the deal: we have examples that I think are quite interesting. And just a couple that come to mind, Hosea's wife, Hosea is told marry a harlot, Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and so forth. And but God uses her, and interestingly enough, and I heard you say this fine woman Rahab from Jericho, and ultimately Rahab becomes the mother of. If you trace the genealogies through the Hebrew Bible and through Chronicles, you see that the Davidic dynasty, right? So, I mean, look, it's
what about Judah? What about Judah and Tamar? Tamar is
exactly
on that list.
She plays the harlot, as they say. But it's interesting that I think we tend to be as outside readers in modern day. We might even read past a verse that says, if that priest's daughter did that, she needs to be torched. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that ought to shock us to the core, because God has many times used these women who were accused of harlotry for great things. So quite possibly,
at least
it just makes me wonder. That's right.
Likes to tell us that's the case. But again, torching a woman for harlotry, though it is not, it should be frowned upon, and cursed is the man who engages in such. Torching them is contrary to the Moses scroll.
Yeah, verse 13, for instance. Here's the we kind of touched on it: a wife in her virginity, a widow, or one divorced, or a profane woman, a harlot. These he cannot take, but a virgin of his own people shall he take to wife.
That's right, that's specific to the high priest. Now we're in the high priest territory from verse 10 to verse 15, and holier, even holier. And in fact, it begins that way: the priest who is exalted above his fellows, on whose head the anointing oil has been poured, and who has been ordained to wear the vestments, shall not bare his head or rend his garments. He shall not go in. And it goes on to say he can't even go to a funeral of his sister or his brother or his father. He can't even do that. So he is certainly most holy.
But By the
What
way,
now?
one point on high priest, just because I have it in my notes, I'm curious, and one of the books on my list this year.
Oh yeah,
Let me get it.
go on.
It's called Zadok's Heirs: The
Mm.
Role and Development of the High Priesthood in Ancient Israel by Deborah Rook, Oxford Theological Monographs. And this digs deeply into not only the high priesthood, but the priestly families that we encounter in later biblical literature. And one of the things that, just skimming through this, thinking, I really need to read this book, it points out, and you and I have had some deep conversations on which family, the family of Abiathar and so forth. Anyway, whenever I look at this, I think, when did the high priest, like we know in the Second Temple times, the high priesthood is a big, big deal, but it's 19 times in the Hebrew Bible, HaKohen HaGadol is mentioned. Only twice in the Pentateuch. Here in Leviticus 21 and in Numbers 35, 25, and 28. Remember, in the death of the high priest and so forth.
Yeah.
And then you get it just sporadically. You have one time in Joshua and then never again until you get to 2 Kings. But most of the references to HaKohen HaGadol come in Haggai, Zechariah, and Nehemiah, which makes me wonder, does it really become, it evolves, certainly, does it become very much a part of the cult system and the hierarchy in a much later date? That's the question. That's one of the things I'm working on. So anyway.
Quite right. Well, I'd be interested once you read that. No doubt you're going to be telling me about that. Here's a curious little thing. We'll brush over this quickly. Yep. Chapter 21, verse 12. The way that it reads in my Jewish study Bible here, he shall not go outside the sanctuary and profane the sanctuary of his God. For upon him, Ross, is the distinction of the anointing oil of his God. And then it says, mine, the Lord's. And I thought that's curious because that's mentioned in a couple of places, I think also 22 verse 2. And I went to the Hebrew and what it says is, it simply says, Ani Yehovah, which is curious. But then it sounds like God is signing off on a commandment that he's giving, which is odd because he continues to speak. In the Jewish study Bible here, just the next verse begins with, he may marry, but it actually is, and he may marry. Like, he stops to sign off and then he just continues. We don't really see that. It's a curious little thing. How does it read in the Torah tablet there?
In the ASV, neither shall he go out of the sanctuary, nor profane the sanctuary of his God, for the crown of the anointing oil of his God is upon him. I am Jehovah.
I am Ani Yehovah,
yeah.
Yep. Funny little thing. Anyway, so there is that. Now, Ross.
Oh, yeah.
21 from 16. The Lord spoke further to Moses. Speak to Aaron and say, no man of your offspring throughout the ages who has a defect, none of your offspring, Aaron, who has a defect, shall be qualified to offer the food of his God. There
now,
it is again.
Let me just stop you. Let me just stop you real quickly because we need to give sort of a warning that in today's world of modern sensibilities, what is following could bring a lawsuit.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead. Now,
discrimination.
Can you imagine?
It is discrimination. It's absolutely discrimination.
Now, listen, imagine a newspaper article that is describing job qualifications and, or in this case, reasons that you can't work at the temple. Go ahead, Jono.
No one, Ross, at all, who has a defect shall be qualified. He is automatically disqualified. No man who is blind, who is lame, or who has a limb too short, which is all of yours, or too long. That's me.
That's true. I would be disqualified.
Evidently, I'd be disqualified too. All of my limbs are too long. No man who has a broken leg or a broken arm, who is a hunchback or a dwarf. You're disqualified.
I'm out
2
twice.
times over. Yeah. Who has a growth on his eye or has a boil, a scar, or scurvy, Need some cabbage and some oranges, or crushed testicles. Now, I don't know what's going on back in the day, Ross. Who are all these people? Like, every now and then you see a hunchback, a dwarf. Your people are peppered throughout the population,
right?
Or who has a growth on their eye, and you're thinking, what's
mine has
inside?
an interesting. Hang on, mine says blind man, lame, or has a flat nose.
Has a flat nose.
Yeah,
you see some of those. You see some flat noses.
A broken foot, broken-handed, crook-back dwarf, humpback, blemish in his eye, scurvy, scabbed, have his stones broken. See, mine is a little
stones
more
broken. That's a bit.
Yours is a little more forward. I don't know. Yeah.
Who are all these people? I mean, look, maybe there is an epidemic of people walking around with crushed. I don't think you'd have a sign. You wouldn't be wearing a T-shirt. And hopefully you're wearing pants. So who knows? Maybe it's more common than we know. I hate to think. But it says in verse 21, no man among the offspring of Aaron, the priest who has a defect, shall be qualified to offer the Lord's offering by fire. Having a defect, he shall not. He's not qualified to offer the food of his God. Here it is again, food of his God. He can eat the food of his God, which is nice that God shares it with him, but of the most holy as well as the holy, but he shall not enter behind the curtain or come near the altar, for he has a defect, Ross. He shall not profane these sacred. You know what? And it goes on somewhere a little bit later. It even emphasizes this idea of having crushed testicles. Where is that?
Yeah, it's just further down. I mean, I can't remember.
22. No, I'm telling you, it's 22:24. I can't believe it goes into this just to make men squirm. You shall not offer to the Lord anything with its testicles. Oh, okay. Bruised or crushed or torn or cut.
That's talking about the sacrifice, though. So the sacrificer and the sacrificee
exactly
are both. Is that right? I mean, that's right. The way it's reading. Yeah.
In the same way that that which you sacrifice must be unblemished, so too must the offerer be unblemished. Now, he can, as we read, he can eat of it. He just can't bring it and participate in the. He can't sacrifice. He can't.
So thumbs up or thumbs down, Jono. Here's what I need you to answer me. In verse 24 of chapter 21, so Moses spake unto Aaron and to his sons and unto all the children of Israel. Did Moses, in your opinion, and you're not going to make friends with everybody here, but I want you to be honest, do you think Moses gave the list that we just read to Aaron? Do you think that really happened?
No, of course not. This is, again, looking at it from the documentary hypothesis perspective, this is P, or this is H within P, the holiness material, holiness code, which most scholars will say, this is post-exilic, this is, way late, way late. And so what we're seeing really is a reflection, all of this stuff is a reflection of how the priests thought. And they may have inherited this from Babylon, for example. I mean, other priestly codes that were very concerned with this sort of.
So we would agree. I want people to understand. It's not that I don't believe that a lot of these things weren't priestly materials, or as I think what did it call it at the beginning? A priestly playbook. But I believe that the playbook is actually written at a much later time in the development of the religion of Israel, like even post-exilic, maybe some of this is way late, but then how do you get someone to recognize the holiness of that? Well, you predate it. You put it in the time of Moses.
And you put the kosher stamp of Moses on it. So the Lord spoke to Moses and said, and this is the stuff that we want to say. You just that's the little kosher stamp that you put on everything that you want to enforce. The Lord spoke to Moses and said.
That's it.
Who are you to question that?
That's right.
So that is that.
So just one final point. Again, in the States, we have the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they would be up in arms if a dwarf with crushed stones showed up to the court and said, I tried to get a job and they wouldn't hire me.
They wouldn't hire. That's absolutely a case for they've got a case to make there and a whole lot of money to win.
Yes.
I think in court for sure. 22, chapter 22. Is this where we are? Or have we just worked our way through that?
No, we're there.
Yeah. Okay. What are we going to do with this? What do you got,
Well,
Ross?
I think in my notes, I have one point. I mean, you can clearly dig in as deep as you want, but it's who can eat of the holy is basically what this chapter deals with. Who can eat it?
Who can eat the food of your God?
And then, but we get the reasons if someone is unclean. You look at verse 4. What man soever of the seed of Aaron is a leper or has an issue, he shall not eat of the holy things. And then again, it's some of the same requirements. It's this hyper holiness of the priestly cadre. If you've been unclean by the dead, or if you've had a nocturnal emission, well, it doesn't even say a nightly, just whose seed goeth from him, or if you've touched a lizard or a creepy thing, not necessarily a lizard,
It's a creeping thing.
Yeah,
that's right.
Anyway, it's a lot of reasons to keep you from eating. Yeah,
and this is chapter 22 is fairly repetitive. But again, it's the this mysterious atmospheric layer of impurity and certain creatures like this creeping thing. If you touch the creeping thing, you've got creeping thing cooties, and you can't go and take part. I'll tell you what's interesting is at the end of 22, something a little bit different here, and says the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, there's your little kosher stamp, verse 27, when an ox or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall stay 7 days with its mother, and on the 8th day, the priests are very, 8th day is very significant to them. They apply this in a number of ways. On the 8th day, it shall be acceptable as an offering by fire to the Lord. That's a bit rough, Ross. It says, however, no animal from the herd or from the flock shall be slaughtered on the same day with its young. 8th day.
Let me say one thing about the 8th day. And I'm no expert on this. The priestly worldview is beyond my mental capacity, I guess. But anyway, it's interesting that as with the priest or the sacrificer, so with the sacrifice. Again, you have the 8th day. Remember the ordination of Aaron and his sons. The priestly writers said you got to wait 7 days, and on the 8th day. Same thing here. There is that at least connection, and then we have very similar the things that disqualify a person from sacrificing would also disqualify the sacrifice.
Yes, yeah. So 8th day. Yeah. So also the circumcised on the 8th day. That's a priestly. There's the 8th day we're going to see in chapter 23. Shmini Atzeret. There's a number of 8th days. It seems to be a magical day for the priests. If I were to take one of my goats, when I had goats, to the abattoir for slaughtering on the 8th day, they would say, "No, dude, come on, go away. Let the mother feed. She's going to get mastitis if she's not having her milk, drunk from the udder." And these are just too young. What are you? Go away.
Yeah.
They won't accept it until it's around at least 3 months old.
Oh, really?
8 days. There's something wrong with this.
So it's really kind of cruel. You're saying it would be cruel to the mother.
It's cruel to the mother. Absolutely, it's cruel to the mother. She needs to have her udders drained.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she risks suffering from mastitis. It's just. But also, it's not right. You don't 8 days. It's not right. All right. When you sacrifice, what else we have here? Oh, has to be eaten on the same day. You shall not leave any of it until morning. So we talked about that when we talked about this is verse 30 about the reckoning of a day. Is it from morning till morning, or is it from evening to evening? This verse certainly suggests it's from morning to morning. It shall be eaten on the same day. You shall not leave any of it until morning. That's the next day. It has to be eaten on the same day. That's a curious thing. You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I am the Lord. You shall not profane my holy name. That I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. I, the Lord, who sanctify you. I brought you, here we go, and I brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord. Here we are at chapter 23, Ross. Oh,
All
you know what?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Now, let me kick off by reading a little bit of, I just want to read a quote from Von Rad, who I quite like, Gerard Von Rad, and this is the Old Testament Theology 65.
Von Rad, that's a cool name. Who is Von
a cool
Rad? I mean, is
German,
he a
German
author?
scholar. He's just a great theologian. I quite like him.
All right.
He says, Von Rad says, the festal calendar is, of course, Canaanite in origin, and as such, now, Ross, just wait a little, okay, and as such is the expression of a farmer's religion which looks on the processes of sowing and reaping as direct sacral events. Obviously, however, in Israel, very soon after the settlement, and in spite of the fact that she herself had become a completely farming people, the content of these festivals underwent a change. At unleavened bread, the festival which falls at the beginning of the barley harvest, the exodus from Egypt was commemorated, and at the great harvest and vintage festivals, the sojourn of the wilderness and the dwelling in booths. That's where we are now. Mm-hmm. Before this, he says, the festivals had been purely agrarian, but Israel historicized them. And some of them, or perhaps all of them, Ross. We should not be surprised at this. After all, we see Christianity did the same thing with Easter. Easter's a great example because Easter, of course, is named after Ishtar, and there is no mention of this Babylonian goddess or is Ishtar Assyrian? In the New Testament, there's no mention of her. But rather than have anything to do with Passover, they decided, well, let's just appropriate this other one that we like, and we'll make it about Jesus. It's around the same time of the year. There is a case to be made, and we might talk about this a little bit later too, with Hanukkah. Hanukkah, the argument is that it was probably a festival of lights observed by surrounding nations, or a particular nation on the outskirts of Israel that was popularized in Israel, and it was given the history of the Maccabees to sort of justify its existence. So we don't have to get rid of it. Let's just make it about this, right? And so we see this happening in history. We shouldn't be surprised if it happened with these feast days as well. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me say, because I know that a lot of people, a lot of the viewers, it's the festivals that's one of the mainstays. It's one of the things that brought them from one place in the faith, maybe Christianity, into a more Hebraic expression of their faith, whatever that is. And so the festivals really, I can as well, and all of those things, like how many of us haven't read Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons, and you say, I'm going to put away all those pagan festivals and keep because Leviticus 23 begins, these are the festivals of the Lord of Yod-Heh-Vaveh. So there's this idea that what we have in the Hebrew Bible is a pure form of God's festivals, and they are not paid, right? So they've already lived through that painful process of taking something they thought was holy and finding out it wasn't holy. So now you're suggesting, Von Rad and some of these others, and here's what I would add to this. You asked me about my view. Maybe the Bible itself hints that what we think were the order and arrangement and timing of the festivals and the keeping of these festivals was not quite as it appears. We're going to see as we go through this, and I know we're coming up on an hour already, but we're going to see some things that is quite interesting that I think is going to surprise some people as we work through. So I wanted to go. I'm going to let you jump back in, and then throw it to me when we open up on the festivals, because I had one point I read in the New Oxford.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want you to read that, and before we do, just to emphasize the fact that it is again, given this kosher stamp, it begins with Shabbat. And Shabbat, of course, we know is in the 10 words in our canonical text, the fourth commandment, I think, depending on how you number them. And it is the second commandment in the Moses scroll. And so it kicks off with that one, as if to say everything that follows is equally as sacred as this one here. So it starts with, on 6 days, work may be done, but on the seventh day there shall be a Sabbath rest a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred occasion. You shall do no work. It shall be a Sabbath of the Lord throughout your settlements. Everyone's like, well, yeah, we know that one. We know that for sure. That's very important to us. And then verse 4, these are the set times, equally as important, equally on the calendar. And it begins with Pesach. Yes, Ross.
You know what I noticed here that I hadn't noticed? I noticed it because of a note. So I'm not going to read the note in the New Oxford. I'm going to show you what it says or what it showed me. Look at this. Chapter 23, verse 2, part B, these are the appointed festivals of the Lord that you shall proclaim as holy convocations, my appointed festivals, and then it describes Shabbat. And then, look at verse 4, you just did it. These are the appointed festivals of the Lord, the holy convocations, which you shall celebrate. The note asks a question. It has a different result in the thinking, but why would you have that same phrase repeated? It's almost as if there was an original point that said the Sabbath is an appointed festival of the Lord that you should keep, and then another writer wants to suggest, oh, these are the appointed festivals too. Why would you, that's redundant. Why would you have two? Yeah. It's interesting because what we find after Shabbat, let's assume just for a moment, let's entertain that maybe Shabbat is the festival that God puts as top notch. I mean, it's the one in the 10 words. And then you want to add others and give them the importance that you give to the Shabbat. What do? You add another note that says, oh, and these are also. You see? Now, the note here is saying the equation of Shabbat and sacred festivals may have led to the prohibition of work on the festivals, which is not attested in non-priestly calendars. So what it begins to do is and look, this is more troubling for people than almost anything when they find out that if you look at this, for instance, the priestly calendar of festivals, and you compare it to other festival calendars in the Pentateuch even, and you begin to see differences. Do you know why there are so many arguments and debates on the festivals and the rite keeping? Because everyone is confused because of the different readings in all these different texts, different sources. Anyway.
Yep. Absolutely. Now,
something to think
here's
about.
An interesting thing. Verse 5, in the first month on the 14th day. We just jumped over something that we all tend to get quite excited about, Ross, and that's New Year's Day. There seems to be no occasion, no marking of New Year's Day. It just goes straight to, on the first month, there's a first month. And then there's a whole lot of arguments about how do you determine the first month. You know, we have the grasshoppers, as I like to refer to them, as those who go and look at the barley and the ripening of the barley. And
Aviv,
that's fine.
Exodus 12, this is the beginning of months to you.
There it is.
But it doesn't mention it here.
Exodus 12 talks about Aviv, but here it doesn't mention Aviv. It says the first month. They're given numbers, right? First month. Doesn't mention that here. And so how exactly is it determined? Don't want to get into that, my goodness. And you know what? This is the freeing thing, I got to say, Ross, is the freeing thing about the Moses scroll that I love so much is that all of the arguments and the having to know all the reason why this sect believes it like this, or this sect believes this, and this is the way they observe it. I don't have to care about that anymore. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the minute detail of all of this stuff. But yeah, it kicks off with Pesach. For example, verse 11. Maybe I'm jumping over stuff that you would like to look at, but it says, I've got that fly. Okay, it's dead. Good, die, fly. No, I'm unclean because I touched a creeping thing. He shall elevate the sheep. You can
still eat the meal. You just can't do it.
Okay. Shall elevate the sheep before the Lord for acceptance on your behalf. the priest shall elevate it on the day after Shabbat. And now people say, one sect says, well, day after what Shabbat? I mean, we're to understand that the first day of unleavened bread, Hag HaMatzot, is a Shabbat. Is it after that Shabbat, or is it after the weekly Shabbat? Well, this is the difference between a Karaite view and a rabbinic view, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, over which wars have been fought. You know, I mean, this is a really big deal because it throws out the whole calendar. Your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. I tell you, it's the morrow after has been one of the biggest fights in the history of religious calendar fighting. And that is a big deal. And you're not going to solve it tonight. You're not even, you just said you're not interested necessarily.
Get into it. Yeah.
In the comments, I guarantee you that we're going to have the experts come forward and convince us. But here, let me add one thing, because you did kind of jump over Pesach, didn't you?
Yeah.
And let me just say, I am currently really digging deeply into the idea of when did Pesach really become a thing. And I know people, are very disturbed when I say that, but let me explain. You get the introduction in Exodus 12, which, by the way, the beginning of months is missing in Leviticus 23, at least that part of it. But then you don't have another Pesach until Numbers chapter 9, and it's the second Passover, and it's in the second year coming out of Egypt. But then we find that Moses doesn't circumcise anybody. Oddly, that's mentioned as if that's something noteworthy by the writer of Joshua. So Joshua 5 is then a Passover, but then we don't have another Passover until hundreds and hundreds of years later mentioned. So I just want to say, one of the books I always recommend, Jono, and it's in the description here, a Synoptic Harmony of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles by Newsom. The best book I think people could buy, other than the Moses Scroll and, the new, these are the words. But here you go. Page 253. This is in the days of Josiah, 622 BCE. So we're talking 600 years to 800, depending on when you date the Exodus. And it's, listen to what it says, verse 2 Kings 23:22. No Passover had been kept since the days of the judges who judged Israel, or during all the days of the kings of Israel or of the kings of Judah. No such Passover. It says no such in English. We'll talk about it. 2 Chronicles 35, no Passover like it had been kept in Israel since the days of Samuel the prophet. None of the kings of Israel had kept such a Passover as was kept by Josiah. Now, what people often do with this is they say, well, yeah, but they kept the Passover. They just didn't keep a good one exactly right. If you go back and read from the time of Joshua, we don't see any Passovers being kept in not in the book of Judges, not in Joshua after 5, not Judges, 1st, 2nd Samuel. Something's weird here, Jono. It's like Passover becomes a thing in the days of Josiah.
In the days of Josiah.
Isn't that odd?
It's really interesting. So, of course, the Moses Scroll does say in the first commandment, God says in the first person, I am Elohim, your Elohim, who liberated you from the land of Egypt, from the house of servitude. It shall not be to you other gods. That's fine. So obviously they have been brought out of Egyptian territory. They were under. Maybe they were. So they were. They're now an independent nation, an independent people. They've been liberated.
Sure.
Obviously, that's something to celebrate. Maybe they did celebrate it. Maybe they marked that occasion. We just don't have, to your point, an example of that ever being observed. And there would be nothing wrong with them recalling, this is the day that God brought us out from Egyptian territory and we were a liberated people. That's absolutely fine. But it doesn't happen until Josiah. And the interesting thing about that, of course, is that we know Jeremiah. The narrative tells us that they found the scroll of the Torah of Moses in the temple. Oh, lo and behold, here it is. And he takes the opportunity, it seems quite obvious, to take out the blessings, right? The blessed be the man, just to clarify so we don't get all those messages again. The blessed be the man section, take those out because we cannot have everyone knowing that they can be blessed by God simply by observing the 10 words, and sew in all of this civil law that I want them to observe. Now, that's chapter 12 to 26 of Deuteronomy. And in chapter 12 to 26 of Deuteronomy, Ross, what do we have when it comes to concurrence with Leviticus chapter 23?
Well, we do have chapter 16 of Deuteronomy, which, if that's what you're talking about, it goes into one other form. A different hand gets a crack at what are the festivals. So we've got one in Deuteronomy 16. We've got also in Exodus.
Wait! Before we get out of there, what does it say? All of so here in Leviticus chapter 23.
Do we bring Ezra in? Do we bring Ezra in yet?
Let's do that. Okay, let's do that.
All right, let's just ask Ezra maybe, and help me clarify what we're going to ask Ezra. Do you want to ask Ezra if we can have Ezra show, compare and contrast in a brief summary the distinct different hands in the list of festivals in the Pentateuch? Maybe?
Yeah, and the difference in the lists. Yeah, that's right.
Let's do that.
All of the lists, yeah.
Let us know what you think. What do you think there, Ezra?
Now we're getting into the good stuff. The textual layers where the seams of the Torah really start to show. When it comes to the festival calendars, we're not looking at one unified liturgical system, but rather a gradual evolution across different sources with different agendas. Start with Exodus 23, which scholars often link to the covenant code, a very early legal layer. The festivals here are agricultural. Unleavened bread, the harvest, which later becomes Shavuot, and ingathering, which becomes Sukkot. There's no mention of historical events, no temple ritual, just feasts tied to the land and its produce. It reflects a pre-centralized agrarian society where local shrines and seasonal cycles ruled the day. Then you hit Exodus 34, which is a puzzle in itself. It's part of what's sometimes called the ritual decalogue, and it looks like a kind of alternative covenant renewal. The festivals are similar, but this time with different emphases, like not boiling a kid in its mother's milk thrown right in the mix. This version may reflect an even older or parallel tradition, possibly Northern Israelite in origin. Jump ahead to Deuteronomy 16, and now we're in the Deuteronomist territory, late monarchic period, Josianic reform era. The festivals are still agriculturally anchored, but there's a big shift. The focus is on centralization. All sacrifices must be brought to the place Yahweh will choose, code for Jerusalem. There's also a strong social justice flavor. The concern isn't just ritual, it's communal equity. Make sure the Levite, the widow, the orphan, and the sojourner are all included in the celebration. Finally, Leviticus 23, the priestly list. This one's the most structured and liturgical. It reads like a temple calendar, complete with sacrifices, holy convocations, and detailed timing. It also introduces new elements like the Omer count between Passover and Shavuot, and the idea of Sabbath as a festival itself. It's clearly post-exilic, likely coming from a time when the priestly class was re-establishing order and defining sacred time through ritual precision. So, what we see is not contradiction, so much as development, each layer responding to its historical context, from localized farming festivals to centralized national pilgrimage to priestly liturgy within a rebuilt or imagined temple system. The festivals evolve from communal gatherings around the harvest into theological statements about identity, memory, and divine order.
Okay, cool. So what we have then is Deuteronomy chapter 16, the New Revised Josiah version is
NRJV.
NRJV. We have the three pilgrimage festivals. That is also reflected as Ezra just said in Exodus chapter 23 as well, right?
Yeah.
There are the three pilgrimage festivals. They're described slightly differently, and there's some differences there, but it's the three. When you get to Leviticus chapter 23, you have two extra, and those two is Yom Teruah, although I don't think it's called Yom. It's called the Day of Shouting, right? I guess we have that first day of the seventh month, and then we have the 10th day of the seventh month, Yom Kippur, right?
Which, by the way, is considered later. It becomes associated with being the holiest day. The holiest of holies.
Yeah, holiest of holies. And so these two are added, Ross. And the thing that I find really fascinating about this is Nehemiah chapter 8. So for a number of reasons, but what we find in Nehemiah chapter 8 is that they have the scroll of of Moses, and they're like, this is great. Now, what exactly do they have? We ask ourselves. And when we first read this, years ago, when we first started getting into the Moses scroll, we thought, oh, maybe they had the Moses scroll, maybe they did. But actually, what it appears is that they had the revised Josiah version, and we know this because they talk about the 3 pilgrimage festivals. What it doesn't mention, Ross, is Yom Teruah. And it's interesting because Ezra, they all gather on the first day of the 7th month.
Nobody's making noise or blowing a trumpet. Nobody mentions it.
No one mentions it at all. Nothing about it is mentioned. In fact, what happens is that they are, this is really interesting. They are reading the Torah on that day. Now, according to Deuteronomy chapter 31, Ross, verse 10, if I remember correctly, let me just go there. This is a fascinating thing because it's an addition. It's clearly an addition, this part here. 31. It says in verse 9, this is after the scroll of the Torah of Moses ends, right? And then it says in verse 9, Moses wrote down this teaching and gave it, this is the scroll of the Torah of Moses, and gave it to the priests, sons of Levi, who carried the ark of the Lord's covenant, and to all the elders of Israel. And then it says in verse 10, and Moses instructed them as follows: every 7th year, Ross, the year set for remission, at the Feast of Booths, which is the 14th, 15th day of the 7th month, when all Israel come to appear before the Lord your God in a place that he will choose, you shall read this teaching aloud in the presence of all Israel. So that is the day on which you shall do that. But for Ezra and Nehemiah, they don't know anything about that, right? They're going to read it aloud on the first day of this, and the first day of the 7th month has nothing to do, as far as they're concerned, with Yom Teruah. Nevertheless, they mention the 3 pilgrimage feasts, if I remember correctly. But what they don't mention, aside from Yom Teruah, is Yom Kippur. Nothing of that.
It's like they're just, they look right past it. They're like, hey, here we are on the first day of the 7th month, which means absolutely nothing to us. What we're going to do is we're going to start getting ready to do Sukkot. And no one in the crowd says, hey, you just read from the Torah that on the 10th day of the 7th month, so they didn't hear that.
Nothing.
No
nothing of it.
No 2 goats. Nothing
None of
about nothing about maybe afflict your soul. None of that. They're joyous, right?
Yeah. They begin and they're a bit upset that they haven't been doing everything, and then the Levites say to them, hey, don't be upset. You got to be happy about this. Don't worry about it. But it does seem like they have the revised Josiah version. Now, the other interesting thing, of course, is that it only takes from dawn till midday is the time frame that we're told specifically that they read this scroll.
I remember when you first saw that. That was a light bulb for you and for me, because when you called me and you said, hey, man, listen, you read that to me, and I thought, that is huge. I mean, because it gives you a pocket, a window of time in which you couldn't possibly read through the whole Pentateuch as we think of it.
Yeah. And once again, in chapter 23 of our Torah portion, verse 36, it talks about the 8th day, etc. It talks about the 8th day. And traditionally, that is the day in the synagogue when they will actually read from the beginning of Exodus to the end of Deuteronomy, and the beginning of Genesis, rather. And it takes, I think you said something like 28 hours.
20 some odd, yeah.
At least a full day, 24, 28 hours, whatever. Here in Nehemiah, it's a maximum 6-hour window that they read this. Yeah. And now some people will say, oh, well, they didn't read it all.
Right.
Okay, sure. All right. But that's not.
Oh, my goodness. This is, man.
That's chapter 23, unless there's anything else that you want to.
Yeah, let me just ask one more question. And this is just to plant a seed for people to think about. Let's say you get Leviticus 23, and we're focused there. We read through the festivals there, and you get the fall festivals. One of the best, I think it was one of the revivals for me spiritually and intellectually, and it drew me into a Torah-based faith, as I would call it then. was the idea that the fall festivals were so much a part of my newly found faith. The beginning, like you said, Yom Teruah, the Rosh Hashanah is the way it evolved later. We know, everyone admits that Rosh Hashanah, as it's currently practiced, is an evolution from Yom Teruah. We're just taking it a step further and saying, we think that Yom Teruah is clearly known or practiced. It was something. So here was the fall festivals. You have to start off with the sounding of the trumpet, and of course, tradition says every day for 10 days you're going to blow these, because these are the days of awe, not mentioned in Scripture. But it's going to be the days of awe, getting you ready for the day that your soul is sealed for an entire year, and the high priest is going to go into the Holy of Holies once a year, only once a year, and that's the only time that the name of God is ever pronounced, which is not true. Nothing in the Bible says anything more clearly than that the name of God was used all the time throughout history. But anyway, be that as it may, here's the question I want people to think about. If you read that these festivals were to be done every year, where, leave it in the comments, where do we find Yom Teruah kept? I'm not talking about find instances of the verb Teruah and tell me what it means. I used to write articles on that to celebrate Yom Teruah, but where is Yom Teruah kept? And then once you find all of those examples in all the big old Bible, find every example of the keeping of Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim, the holiest day of the year. And then go ahead and find, while you're looking, any occurrence of Sukkot prior to this episode in Ezra and Nehemiah. You would think, anyway.
It'd be the most important days, so you'd think it'd be everywhere.
Oh, it's going to be everywhere.
Leave it in the comments.
That's right.
Now, that's the priestly calendar, right? Now, we all know that Hanukkah, as I mentioned before, is something that happened during the era of the Maccabees, defeating the Seleucid Greeks and so on and so forth. Great story, good stuff. How big is Hanukkah in the Jewish calendar these days? Well, when we get to chapter 24, Ross, it begins this way, and rabbis like to suggest that this is maybe a wink and a nod or a type and a shadow of Hanukkah.
Ooh, I like types and shadows.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the Israelite people to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting the kindling of lamps regularly. Aaron set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain of the pact, and to burn from evening till morning before the Lord regularly. And it's a law for all time throughout the ages. He set up the lamps, the pure lampstand before the Lord to burn regularly." And there it is. That's your type and shadow of Hanukkah. It's hasn't yet happened, but it's going to be part of the Jewish calendar. And you got to do that. Of course, the problem is that the reason for the observance of Hanukkah to do with the candle and the oil and this and that doesn't come forth until a couple of centuries, I think, after the history of the Maccabees and what happened there. So the miracle of the oil doesn't appear until a couple of centuries later, and that's the reason why Karaites won't observe it that way. They refuse to say that this is a divine miracle, because during the festival of the Hag of Hanukkah, you light the candles and you say the prayer, blessed are you, Lord God, who commands us to do this. And they say, well, no, he didn't do it. And so they don't do it. I would go further and say, how about we apply that frame of thinking to all of the Pentateuch, and be as discerning like that.
I like the word discerning.
I like discerning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we do get out of all of the laws, Ross, eventually, and we find ourselves in 24:10 and on. This is the last part of our Torah portion, and it's a narrative. It's a story, and we like stories, don't we,
I do like, everybody likes a good story, Jono.
Everyone likes a good. There came out among the Israelites, Ross, one whose mother was an Israelite, and whose father was Egyptian. Now, what is he?
What is he? He's a blasphemer. He's a blasphemer.
Hang on. Before we get there.
Sorry. Let me scratch that.
What is he? What is he so far, though? His mother is an Israelite. His father is Egyptian.
He's this is one of those, where do you trace your lineage?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Well, it depends. You said his mother is an Israelite?
Yep. His mother is an
according to
Israelite.
Judaism, then he's an Israelite.
According to Judaism, he is Jewish. That's right. According to Judaism, and this is again, it's much later.
Matrilineally.
Matrilineal descent is something that appears much later in the Talmud. But the unbroken rule through the whole of the Tanakh is patrilineal. Absolutely patrilineal. And I think it's best represented in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 15, which is lifted from the Moses scroll. I attach to your fathers to love them and to their seed after them.
Right.
And it is an unbroken rule. So here he is an Egyptian. He has an Egyptian father, thus he is an Egyptian. And a fight broke out in the camp between what refers to a half Israelite and a certain Israelite. The son of an Israelite woman pronounced the name in blasphemy. Now, what does it mean to pronounce the name in blasphemy? I'll let you speculate on that. And he was brought to Moses. Now, his mother's name was Shelomit, daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. That's an interesting thing about that, by the way. And it is Alter that highlights, he said, he attributes this to someone named Mary Douglas. The detection of meaning within the names. He said these names mean compensation or retribution, daughter of lawsuit from the tribe of judgment. Interesting. Yeah, curious thing. What does it mean to blaspheme the name, Ross?
Well, I know that there are a lot of good study notes. I was going to open up and read one, but I'll just say some suggest later theologically that this is the person even pronouncing the name. That's the problem, and that becomes part of the later stricture around the use of the name. But I think this is involving something more, and some have suggested that it even denotes maybe a cursing of God, basically something very, very harsh against the God. Right, and so I think that's the way most people see that.
And some people interpret this story because it leaves a lot to the imagination. But perhaps he went out to stake a claim in land, and the Israelites said to him, "Listen, dude, you're an Egyptian. You have no stake in land here." And perhaps then he cursed the name of God.
Speaking of types and shadows, let me just say quickly.
Go ahead.
Back in the day when I was all into the prophecies and I was a Christian and I had it all figured out and my eschatology was all wrapped up in the book of Revelation, and I remember that I was looking for the identity of the Antichrist, the false Messiah, and I thought, man, this is a type and shadow of that guy, because it's of mixed heritage, and the tribe of Dan being involved really gave me a big clue. You know why?
Oh, yeah?
Because, the tribe of Dan is not mentioned.
That's
exactly.
right.
So that's why. Anyway, so let people think of that what they will. But I don't believe that anymore. But I admit I did at one time. So
here is the remedy, Ross. Take the blasphemer out of the camp and let all who are within hearing of him blaspheming. This is a little bit of Yom Kippur, right? Lay their hands on his head, so they're transferring their hurting ears, the sin of his blasphemy, back onto him, and let the whole community stone him. So he is stoned with stones until he is dead, and there you go, he's dead.
Done deal.
Done.
There you go.
Yep.
Life for life.
Life for life.
Well, I tell you.
Yeah. So that is there anything else we want to drag out of that?
No, I think we're ready to read our comment, and we're gonna probably have more of comments like this after your performance tonight.
Is my performance tonight any more controversial than any other Torah portion that we've done?
I don't know, but let me tell you, we got a note, and just as a reminder for those who still love us, and there are people who still love us, believe it or not. They can not only get this video and watch the video and share it with their friends and family and loved ones, but they can also get the program on Truth to You. It's everywhere. It's on, it's all over. And you can get it on Apple Podcasts. You get it on Spotify.
You can leave comments on all
of
these places.
You can leave comments on all of those places. Well, I try to keep up with it, but I didn't know that sometime back, a couple of months ago, we got a comment from a guy by the name of Joey Bag of Donuts.
Joey Bag of Donuts, what a great name. I love that.
Bag of I love it too.
Joey Bag
I
of
said,
Donuts.
look, and the you get to write in a little a description of your love for us or whatever the case may be. So Joey Bag of Donuts titles his what follows meh, M-E-H, meh. You know, it says,
Do you want to read it or shall I read it? You're going to read it. Okay, go.
Yeah, let me read it.
All right.
I used to love these guys.
Used to.
But between the AI,
That's
the
right.
constant agreeing with the document hypothesis, as well as just basically making the entire Bible to be a pointless work of man, really all you need is an obscure version of the Ten Commandments. I mean, what's the point? At this point, it can only be about making money. Either say,
I gotta say, when I first read this, I burst out laughing when I read
Did you
that.
think about me losing my job and paying my own salary out of my retirement funds? Yeah, I'm rolling in the dough here. Yeah.
It is. It was the funniest thing. I mean, what's the point? At this point, it can only be about making money.
By the way,
I almost wish that were true.
By the way, everything we do, literally everything we do, podcasts, the Saturday mornings, everything is supported free. We don't even on our YouTube channel, just for one more quick rant, I don't even click the box to take and put commercials in so I make some money off of the videos. I don't even do that. And I could, but I don't because I hate commercials. I believe don't do unto others what you hate. So anyway, here we go. It's all about making money, says Joey Bag of Donuts.
Yep.
Either say, follow the commandments, that's all that's possibly true, and then stop making shows. Or it's about Patreon, views and making a living, destroying scriptures by pointing out a myriad of discretions. I think he means discrepancies, not discretions. Not really feeding people, just yanking biblical food out of the mouths of those who are already starving and asking for what's left in their wallets. Ladies and gentlemen,
that's what we do.
Get your checkbooks out.
Get your wallets, whatever's in there, whatever's left in your wallet. Send it on through.
Send it to God. Make the checks out to Ross.
Never, ever have we ever done that. My word, it's the funniest thing. But obviously this person, Joey Bag of Donuts, thinks that we're doing this for the money and that we ask you for the money. Never, ever. In fact, I never talk about this, Ross. Ever do I talk about this? But I always feel awkward about ever suggesting people might support Truth to You or support the Holier Institute or anything like that. Don't like to do it. I do have a day job in a museum. Love it. It's great. And I support myself a little bit that way, and it's really just a little bit. I do have three wonderful, count them, three wonderful supporters, and I think Truth to You probably makes about $1 a day. It's really about $1 a day. And the only thing that might make us money would be Tanakh tours, but we really do that as sort of that's operated like a not-for-profit. It's not a not-for-profit because we don't have 501c3 here in America, in Australia. But we don't make anything from that. It pays our way. And that's it. That is it.
No. Let me just say from this side, Joey Bag of Donuts, you can become a member if you wish of our team, the Yakad. These are our financial supporters, and they help make things free for anybody who wants them. And that is, you can join at any tier on Patreon. You get the same things no matter what. You can join our YouTube channel. Just click the become a member, and quite a few people have done that. Or you can become a member through Discord. Some people donate to the Horeb Institute. And what we do with that, a lot of that goes back into making study aids and classes and so forth that's available to anybody in the world. We do write books. We do publish books. We do sell books. But I also give books away when someone writes and they say, look, I don't have these. Could you send them? So anyway,
No,
Joey
and
Bag
by
of
the
Donuts,
way,
we really do want Joey Bag of Donuts to come back. We want him to love us
come back, Joey.
again. Come back,
Yeah.
Joey.
Put down the donuts, come back. Hey, and it's not just, let me just say, it's not just you and I. It is, of course, Seth, because Seth does an enormous amount of work behind the scenes, just a lot of hours just to put these out. And he, too, is like, we are absolutely not doing this for the money, but we're doing it because I'll tell you why we're doing it, is because we think that not only is the Word of God important, like really important, it is very important to us. But in addition to that, we really do believe, like overwhelmingly believe, that the Torah, the Moses Scroll, is the original document. That the Moses Scroll is an authentic copy of the original document upon which the entire Tanakh is based. Certainly, the Pentateuch bounces off from there, and it's important to us to distill what is original, what is not, and even if we come away from the Tanakh saying, well, clearly all of this is priestly, this is added much later, this, that, and the other, this is actually not divinely imparted. It's still fascinating from a historic point of view.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it adds a lot of clarity as to, and we're exceptionally blessed, my goodness, to have the Moses Scroll and to be able to say, okay, so how did this evolve from here? And why was this left out of the canonical text when it's clearly in here? And it's fascinating. And because we are so fascinated with it, we want to share that. We want to share that with people. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm excited because I want to say, I love the Bible and I love looking at this through a historical, critical, academic angle, a view that I haven't looked at all my life. But what I'm finding fascinating about this is we clearly find texts which are discrepant, to Joey's point. There are things, we have different sources that describe different viewpoints on different subjects. We have two different people that supposedly killed Goliath. We have all of these different stories. We have two different flood narratives, two different creation narratives. They don't agree. But we have two different accounts of the Ten Commandments, if not four, if you count Exodus 34 and Leviticus 19. We have all of these different
Anachronisms
stories.
galore.
Yes.
And what is it? Leviticus chapter 16, I think, as you point out. And Exodus chapter 16. So the Shabbat and the manna and so on and so forth. There's just all of this stuff. There's just so many of them. It is overwhelming. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it only reveals itself more and more. Another thing I'll add to that, Ross, by the way, is you and I have had conversations on multiple occasions. We do this every couple of years, I think, where we say to each other, if we really wanted to, we could make an enormous amount of money. We know exactly how to do it.
Oh, man.
We know what tickles the ears of people, and we know what they want to hear. But it would have to, it would mean that we would have to compromise, and we can't do it. We just can't do that. Yeah,
that's
but
right.
If we wanted to, we could.
Yeah, that's right.
So money was the aim.
We're having a little bit of fun, but in all honesty, I do recognize and I can appreciate that for some, this is a bridge too far. I get it. There is a fundamentalist, apologist approach to the Bible, and we're challenging that. But listen, Jono, it's something you and I have discussed many times. It's no different than we did when we were fundamentalist Christians and we began to analyze intellectually, honestly, take a look at probably some different, some tension between Paul and Jesus. And then we looked at the Gospels versus where they supposedly quote the Tanakh, and we found differences there. And our faith has been defined and redefined, and we've not given up. We're both men of faith. We believe that when you work your way through the difficulties, you distill down to the point where we come to what we believe is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Pretty convinced of that at the moment. And but to your point, I mean, Truth to You was a counter-missionary program for a number of years, and these kind of comments would flow through all of the time. In regards to just leave the New Testament alone, stop picking on the New Testament. Why are you doing? People that are upset. That's fine, but that's what happens when you distill. You you're left with less and less and less until you have something pure. And it's the pure that we're interested in.
And one thing, and that, by the way, in the year that the scroll was discovered in the days of Josiah, we have a text in Jeremiah chapter 15 where Jeremiah chapter 15, where God tells him, if you will pull the precious from the profane, you'll be my spokesman. And I think that's what we're doing in a way, is we're seeking to find and pull the precious from the polluted. And just so people know, one more point that I have to make, because people who listen to this, some of this group listens to Saturday mornings classes. I'm beginning to use more text on occasion from the Christian writings at time. And here's why. It's not that I'm becoming a full-blown Christian, like I've suddenly redefined my faith again, but when I put on the shelf the Christian writings years ago, part of that was because I said, well, that doesn't align with the perfect, holy, perfect, authoritative, inerrant word in the Hebrew Bible. Well, now that I find that has also been edited, I look historically across the centuries, and I find things which support and advance. It's interesting.
So you look at the New Testament, and you look at the New Testament and you say, oh, well, okay, so, who wrote this and what's the theology of it?
Authorship questions,
authorship questions. And you're like, well, the interesting part of it all is, what were they thinking back then? How did they understand certain commandments, and how is that reflected in the text that's supplied to us? That's what, and how is that reflected with the Moses scroll? Because we should do a program on this at some stage, but there are some interesting reflections of the Moses scroll within the New Testament. So there's that. But I guess I would just say that I find it incredibly relieving. I find it relieving that we have a document that we feel is the pure, is the distilled, pure, original scroll of the Torah of Moses. It is a great relief that, particularly when we get to books such as Leviticus, that we no longer have to look at this and pretend that it is divinely imparted and we must do our best to observe all of these things. And I find it liberating, Ross. I really do. I find it absolutely liberating.
I'm happy to say that none of you should ever have to worry about torching your daughter if she's promiscuous. Please don't do that. I know you can find verses which say it, but just don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Jono, as we prepare to leave for tonight and tell everybody, bid everyone adieu, let's let them remember, leave comments. Leave us some comments. And Joey, thanks for coming on and leaving us a comment.
And thanks for leaving a comment.
That's right.
That's it. So next week, we're in chapter 25. That is Behar. To the end of, just the beginning of chapter 26. This one's not too long. Maybe this is going to be a short one. We'll find out. All right. But we'll be back again at this time next week. That's it for Torah Pearls. Ezra, take us on out.
All right, folks. That's going to wrap it up for this week's deep dive into Emor. We've sifted through priestly purity, sacred calendars, and the holy chaos of competing festival traditions. We hope you're walking away a little wiser and maybe just a tad more curious. Now, before we sign off, we want to give a warm nudge to our good friend and occasional thorn in our side, Joey Bag of Donuts. Joey, listen, we gave you a bit of a ribbing, but honestly, we'd love to have you back. Pull up a chair, grab a Tanakh, and join the conversation. That goes for everyone else out there too. Invite a friend, bring them into the fold. You never know what insights might come out of that next Torah table. Don't forget, folks, Numbers Torah tablets are now available. And hot off the press is the These Are the Words transliteration edition. Perfect if you're looking to bridge that gap between the Hebrew text and your own reading. Links are in the description. Go check them out. Until next time, keep your calendars sacred and your questions even holier. Shalom.